Hello and welcome to this session. This is Professor Farhat, in which we will discuss unrelated business income tax known as UBIT. What is the main difference between a for-profit business and not-for-profit? So when it comes to a for-profit business and not-for-profit, they both generate revenues. Now the revenue for-profit generate, it's called sales, interest income, other income. Not-for-profit, they call them donation, grants, program revenue, membership revenue. Simply put, they have different type of revenues. That's fine. Then regular businesses will incur expenses, cost of sales, operating expenses, selling and administrative, interest, and taxes. Expenses for not-for-profit, they will have many expenses under the program expenses, administrative expenses, fundraising expenses. What you should not see in a not-for-profit is taxes. Not-for-profit, they don't pay taxes. They don't have federal income tax. Now, state and local, that's a different story. This is not what we are discussing. But for federal, they don't have taxes. However, if the not-for-profit engage in unrelated business income that's unrelated to their mission, they might be subject to taxes. Otherwise, not-for-profit, one feature is there's no taxes. If you want to summarize, for-profit revenues minus expenses minus taxes. Not-for-profit revenues minus expenses, there's no tax deduction. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go real quick over what is a nonprofit, how it's created, the forms needed, then we'll discuss unrelated business income tax. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com.
Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today.
So first thing we need to know is, how does a not-for-profit start? Well, actually it starts with the state. Although it's a federal, it's exempt on the federal level, but a not-for-profit is simply put, it could be a corporation, a trust. So basically what they have to do first, file with the state. Then after they file with the state, they register with the IRS to get what's called a federal ID number. Federal ID number is similar to a social security number. And the corporation that incorporated in the state will file Form SS4. And from the SS4, they will get a federal ID number, just like each individual have a federal ID number. Then they will have to file with the state Form 1023. Form 1023 is important because this is how you obtain your tax-exempt status. And what does that mean? Tax-exempt status means the donor, the people that contribute to your organization, they can have a tax deduction. So let's assume you belong to a church and it's a tax-exempt organization. You happen to contribute at $5,000 in donations throughout the year. Well, you can deduct this $5,000. So if you're talking you're in the 30% tax bracket, you're looking at $1,500 in savings from the IRS, from the US government. So exemptions from sales and property taxes are governed by local laws, and we don't cover local laws. Now, there are many types of not-for-profit. 501c1, 501c2. The most common one is 501c3. So 501 is the most common, which include religious, educational, charitable, scientific, and this is a list of them: amateur sports group, and those dedicated to preventing cruelty to children or animals. When you think of 501c3, think the most common in the US is religious, churches. That's the most common. To qualify for a tax exempt under section 501c3, you have to meet certain criteria. One of them is you cannot distribute earnings to owners. Technically, there are no owners in the not-for-profit, but you cannot distribute your profit to people, members, and you cannot participate in political activity because you are a tax-exempt organization. Once granted the 501c3 status, it enables donor to make contribution, and that contribution is deductible on their US tax return, which is really good. Now, what would the not-for-profit will have to do every year? Every year they have to file Form 990. Hold on a second. You just said they're exempt from taxes. Yes, although they are exempt, this is an informational return. The IRS wants to know how things are going in that not-for-profit. It doesn't mean it's for tax purposes. Notice here you have to report your revenues, you have to report your expenses, and you have to report a lot of things. It's not only that. I'm just showing you revenue and expenses to give you an idea. So you must furnish financial statements similar to those prescribed by GAAP. There are an income statement, a balance sheet, everything. I mean, if you want to study Form 990, download and look at one and read the instruction. Also, the Form 990 serves to verify that the organization continues to operate in alignment with the exempt mission. So on page 3, 4, and 5, they'll ask you questions if you are still following your mission, what activities are you undertaking, so on and so forth. It also reveals information regarding the compensation of top paid employees, and we'll talk about those, and contractors. So part of the 990, you have to make certain disclosure. One of these disclosure is how much you are paying for, in quote, the executives, the people running the organization. And you're going to see why you don't want to pay them too much. You could get into trouble. And under the tax right bill of 1996, 990 filing must be accessible to those who request them. Usually not-for-profit post them online, otherwise you can contact them. Now, there are many types of Form 990. Form 990 is the most common one that I showed you. Is basically, it's comprehensive. We have a 990 easy, shorter than the Form 990, just like there's a 1040, there's a 1040 easy. It means it says for small, not-for-profit, it's easier to fill. This is available for tax-exempt entities with annual gross income less than 200 and total assets less than $500,000. It's shorter than Form 990. It's simpler. Then we even have even a smaller one, Form 990N. This electronic postcard is available for tax-exempt not-for-profit with annual receipt less than $50,000. Just try to make it easier for not-for-profit. Now let's talk about the topic that we started to talk about, is unrelated business income. I just wanted you to just have a brief overview about not-for-profit. Hopefully we did not lose track of the main topic of this session, because we want to go back to unrelated business income. So what's unrelated business income? It's business income that the not-for-profit generate that is not related in any way, shape, or form to their mission. For example, a church might have a business on the side. Well, that business is unrelated to the church mission. It's a business. So tax-exempt organizations are obligated to pay taxes, usually it's as a corporate rate, on income derived from a trade or business unrelated to their tax-exempt purpose. Now, this tax requirement, the goal of it is to prevent not-for-profit from gaining an unfair advantage over for-profit businesses offering similar goods and services. Think about a church. They open a restaurant downtown. It's for the church. Let's assume the restaurant is tax-exempt. You're talking about 30%. So you could pay taxes. Let's assume corporation. Let's keep it even. Let's assume it's a corporate rate. You pay 21%. So regular businesses pay taxes of 21%. If you don't have to pay that 21%, that's a 21% in savings. You can reduce your prices and compete with other corporate businesses and have an unfair advantage over them. Therefore, if you participate in an unrelated business income, unrelated to your not-for-profit mission, then you are subject to taxation. Just simply put, to level the playing ground. Now, determining what constitutes unrelated business can be complex in certain circumstances. It's not always clear-cut. I'll give you an example just to kind of tell you why it's not clear-cut. Sometimes it's not clear-cut. So legislation and a body of case law have evolved over the years to provide guidance on clarification on the issue. So if you're not sure, you can consult a lawyer or basically look at previous law cases. What did they rule under similar circumstances? Just to give you an idea, it's best to kind of illustrate this in an example. Let's say, or let's assume a not-for-profit organization focuses on providing educational program for children. And they decided to open a retail store selling merchandise unrelated to its educational mission, clothing or electronics. But their mission is educational program for children. Now, income generated from the sale of these items would likely be considered unrelated income and subject to taxation. It's simply put a separate endeavor, a separate effort than a tax-exempt mission. Now, let's assume if the same nonprofit operates a bookstore selling educational material directly related to its mission of providing educational program for children. Now, the income generated from the sale of those educational material would likely not be considered unrelated business income and would remain tax exempt. So the point here, it all depends on your mission. If that business is related to your mission, then it's tax exempt. If it's not, then it's taxable. So the key distinction lies in whether the business activity is substantially related to the organization tax exempt purpose or not. Now, more about unrelated business income tax. Even unrelated business income will be exempt if the activity has the following feature: not carried on regular basis. So it's not something you do on regular basis. What that could be, for example, a church, they could have a Sunday spaghetti lunch and other occasions on Sunday versus opening a restaurant. So every Sunday they'll have a spaghetti lunch. Well, yeah, okay, that's fine, or maybe a hot dog or some sort of a lunch. If that activity is run by volunteers, if that activity involves sale of donated items, so people at the church are donating the item to have this lunch for low-income individuals, and it's operated for the convenience of the employees or the patrons of this church, then that income is not taxable. So it cannot be carried on regular basis. It has to be run by volunteers, so you're not paying employees. The majority of the material that you're using is donated, and it's operated for the convenience, basically the people that goes to the church or the employee at that church. So it will still be unrelated business income. Now, there are certain income that's tax exempt. For example, if you have a bank account, the church has a bank account, they earn interest, they have stocks, they receive dividend, income from research revenue, from public entertainment at fair, labor, agriculture, or business trade shows, income from rental or exchange of membership list. Those are tax exempt activities. Now, once you do have unrelated business income, you have to file this form 990T. Now, on the form 990T, this is for 2023. You could be looking at this in 2026, 2027. It doesn't really matter. It's basically the same. There's always a deduction, and the deduction for the past decade has been $1,000. So simply put, if you have less than $1,000, you don't have to file this in unrelated business income. Why? Because if you do file it, you're going to get to $1,000, deduct the $1,000, and you're at zero. So you don't need to do it. Otherwise, you have to report your unrelated business taxable income, this line reserved for whatever. Then you have deductions for net operating loss if you have any, total unrelated business income, specific deductions, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the form. So what is the IRS interested in when you are a not-for-profit? They're interested in a few things. One is cost allocation, how you're allocating your costs between program revenue versus support revenues. They're interested in excessive executive compensation. If you're paying too much for the top employees, remember on Form 990, you have to list the top 5 employees. Also, if you are engaging in activities outside your tax exempt purpose. Why? Because they want to tax you if it's outside the tax exempt purpose. And frankly, sometimes the IRS uses this form to, I don't know, maybe harass people for political reasons. You could look up cases online if you're interested, but that's what they are accused of sometimes. It does not matter. So the Form 990 provide reliable information for donors to assess. So basically, they want this 990 to be provided to the donors, because when you are a donor, you want to take a look at what's happening before you donate. How is this company and this nonprofit spending their money? 990 will give you this. So one critical metric, the program expense ratio, measures the portion of fundraising costs related to the program expense. So how much of your expenses are spent on a program versus allocating expenses to fundraising? You could look at various matrices. It doesn't have to be one of them, but you can look at these ratios. An area of concern arises when the organization report contribution revenue but claim zero fundraising expenses. How is that possible? How is the revenue coming without fundraising expenses? Also, if the IRS deems the wages and benefit to to exceed a reasonable amount. Now, what's a reasonable amount? They don't tell you what's a reasonable amount. They might impose intermediate sanctions on the individual receiving the benefit and the organization managers who approves it. Now, when we say reasonable wages, now let's assume you're running a not-for-profit. And this is a lot of CPAs, they do that. Eventually you can, once, if you do, when I was in practice, I prepared many. I was starting to become an expert in Form 990. So if I wanted to get a job with a not-for-profit, I can run the organization from an accounting perspective, of course. And they'll have to pay me a compensation that's similar to a CPA. But let's assume they pay me too much. Well, if it's too much, then the IRS might penalize you. Now, what's too much? You really don't know what too much is. For example, $100,000 for someone who's running a not-for-profit in New York City may not be a lot because of the cost of living. But if you're paying someone $100,000 in a small town where a person in a similar position running a company earning 60 or 70 or 80,000, this could be excessive. So there's no answer except the case you have. If you were audited, you have to prove why you prove based on this individual experience, a contribution, why you are paying them this much. But now what happened is they have intermediate sanction. Before the intermediate sanctions were introduced, what would happen, the IRS, if they find it too much, they would just simply revoke your tax-exempt status, which is basically the kiss of death for the organization, because the reason people contribute money is because they can get a tax deduction. So the executives who receive this excessive benefit, first, they are mandated to reimburse the tax-exempt status, pay back the money. Also, there's a penalty of 25% on the excess benefit imposed on the individual who received the compensation. You have to pay a 25% penalty, and 10% penalty on the people in the company responsible for approving it. If someone above you approved it, then they get 10% penalty. So failure by the executive to repay the excess amount on time may result in additional tax penalty of 200%. So simply put, they're trying to protect the donors. That's the whole purpose of the IRS. So the money that's being contributed to the organization, it's not going to the pockets of the executives, it's going to the pockets, not the pockets, it's being funneled, it's being used for that mission, whatever that mission happens to be, feeding the poor, a cancer research, whatever that mission happens to be. Let's take a look at this multiple choice question from farhatlectures.com. What is the consequence of an executive receiving excess compensation in violation of IRS regulation for a non-for-profit organization? So what would happen if someone received excess compensation for a not-for-profit? The executive must pay back the excess benefit to the organization. The organization tax-exempt status is automatically revoked. The executive faces criminal charges. The organization is fined for non-compliance. Well, for one thing, we no longer take the tax-exempt. There is an intermediate step, so that's out. The executives don't face criminal charges unless there's fraud involved. And who are they frauding? That's a high standard for criminal charges. The organization is fined for non-compliance, not necessary. Usually what's going to happen, the executive must pay back the excess benefit plus a hefty penalty. So the answer is A. Also, what you have to do now, if you are studying for your CPA accounting students, go to Farhat Lectures, look at additional MCQs. That's going to help you. Invest in yourself. Good luck, study hard, and of course, stay safe.